My wife shrugged and told me she slept with my best friend like she was discussing the weather. I didn't scream or throw anything. Instead, I did something that destroyed them both completely. You see, I own a trucking company and document everything. What I discovered next wasn't just an affair. It was calculated psychological warfare. This is how I made them both pay. My name is Felix Patterson. I'm 61 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Built Patterson Logistics from nothing but a beat-up Ford back in 1995. 28 years later, I own 47 trucks and employ 63 drivers across 3 states. Rochelle and I got married when I was 43. She was working as a dental hygienist then, all smiles and efficiency. I was smitten from day one. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room. The evening it all came apart started like any other Tuesday. I was in my home office when Rochelle knocked on the doorframe. "Felix, we need to talk," Rochelle said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I gave her my full attention. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" She shrugged like she was mentioning the weather. "I slept with Reed. But honestly, just relax about it. It didn't mean anything. Reed Holbrook, my best friend for 32 years. The man who stood beside me at our wedding." The air in the room seemed to thicken. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything. Instead, I stood up slowly and walked to the window. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "Felix, you're being dramatic. It just happened. We were drunk after Belinda's birthday party last month." I turned around. Rochelle was scrolling through her phone like we were discussing dinner plans. That's when it hit me. This wasn't her first confession. This was her first announcement. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my truck keys. "Don't be like this," Rochelle called. "It's not a big deal. People make mistakes." I drove to my office downtown. The building was empty, just the hum of computers. I sat in my chair and opened my computer, accessing the security system I'd installed months ago. Documentation purposes, I told myself. The footage was all there. Dates, timestamps, license plates. Reed's BMW in my driveway on afternoons when I was supposedly at the yard. Audio from the doorbell camera. My wife and my best friend, thinking they were invisible. I printed everything. Screenshots, message logs, credit card statements showing hotel charges on days she claimed to be shopping. The printer hummed for 20 minutes. By 10 p.m., I had a stack of papers. I drove back home and saw Rochelle's car gleaming under the porch light. I walked over and carefully placed the printed screenshots under her windshield wiper. Then I went inside, packed a bag, and drove to my cabin in Branson. My phone started buzzing around midnight, but I'd already turned it off. The next morning would bring consequences. Tonight was just for thinking about how a man rebuilds when the foundation turns out to be quicksand. The cabin in Branson had always been my sanctuary. Built it myself 12 years ago when business was booming and I needed somewhere to clear my head. Cedar walls, stone fireplace, and 40 acres of Missouri woods where a man could think without interruption. I'd brought Rochelle here exactly twice in all those years. She always complained about the lack of cell service and the rustic bathroom. I woke up at dawn to 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. The phone had somehow turned itself back on during the night. I scrolled through Rochelle's increasingly frantic messages without opening them. The preview text told me everything I needed to know. "Felix, what is this? We need to talk now. This is insane. Call me back. You can't just disappear like this." Then came the calls from Reed. 3 voicemails I deleted without listening to. Some bridges don't deserve the courtesy of burning slowly. I made coffee in the old percolator and sat on the porch, watching the sun climb over the tree line. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely at peace. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Fletcher Grimm. Fletcher had been my lawyer since I started the business, a cantankerous old bulldog who charged premium rates and delivered results. I answered on the second ring. "Felix, where the hell are you?" Fletcher's gravelly voice came through clear despite the weak signal. Taking some time to think, "Fletcher, what's the word?" "Your wife showed up in my office an hour ago with a stack of papers, demanding to know if they're real. She looked like she'd been hit by a freight truck." I took a sip of coffee, savoring the bitter taste. "And what did you tell her?" "Nothing, of course. Client confidentiality." "But Felix, where did you get surveillance footage of her car at the Marriott downtown? And credit card records from her personal account?" "I run a trucking company, Fletcher. GPS tracking and financial monitoring are part of the business. Amazing what you can learn when you pay attention to the details. Fletcher chuckled, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. You sneaky bastard. How long have you been collecting this? Let's just say I've been thorough. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I think it's time we had a serious conversation about asset protection. Already clear my calendar. And Felix? That prenup you insisted on 18 years ago is looking pretty smart right about now. After hanging up, I walked down to the small dock I'd built on the pond. The water was glass smooth, reflecting the morning sky like a mirror. I thought about the man who'd built this place, who'd trusted his wife completely and never questioned late nights at work or mysterious shopping trips. That man felt like a stranger now. This new version of Felix Patterson was someone I was just beginning to meet. And frankly, I liked him better already. He didn't make excuses for other people's choices or pretend that loyalty was optional in a marriage. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Belinda Holbrook's shaky voice came through the speaker. Felix, it's Belinda. Reed told me what happened. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Can you please call me? There are things you need to know about what's been going on. I deleted the message and turned off the phone again. Whatever Belinda had to say could wait. Today was about figuring out what came next, not relitigating what had already happened. Fletcher Grimm's law office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same leather chairs, same mahogany desk scarred by decades of heated negotiations, same smell of coffee and Old Spice aftershave. Fletcher himself looked like he'd been carved from Missouri granite. 67 years old, silver-haired, and meaner than a cornered badger when protecting his clients. Sit down, Felix. We need to talk about your father, Fletcher said, pouring 2 cups of black coffee. That stopped me cold. My father? Fletcher, he's been dead 15 years. Your biological father. The one your mother never told you about. Fletcher slid a manila folder across the desk. Reed Holbrook's daddy was a traveling salesman who made stops in 3 counties. Your mother was one of his regular customers, if you catch my meaning. I opened the folder with hands that suddenly felt unsteady. Birth certificates, DNA test results, private investigator reports dating back 6 months. The numbers didn't lie. Reed Holbrook was my half-brother. How long have you known? I asked. Since you hired me to draw up that prenup 18 years ago. I ran background checks on everyone in your circle, including Reed. Found some inconsistencies, started digging. Your mother took this secret to her grave, but records don't lie. I stared at a photograph of Reed's father, my father. Same jawline, same hands, same crooked smile I saw in the mirror every morning. Does Reed know? Not unless he's done his own DNA work. But here's the kicker, Felix. Rochelle found out 3 months ago. The coffee turned to acid in my mouth. Ow, one of those ancestry websites. She submitted your DNA without telling you. Said it was for a surprise family tree project. When the results came back showing Reed as a close relative, she put the pieces together. The room spun slightly. Rochelle hadn't just cheated with my best friend. She'd cheated with my brother, knowing exactly what it would do to me. This wasn't weakness or opportunity. This was calculated cruelty. There's more, Fletcher continued. Your neighbor, Eunice Kowalski, has been keeping detailed notes about comings and goings in the neighborhood for 40 years. Turns out she saw things differently than what Reed and Rochelle thought. He handed me a composition notebook filled with Eunice's careful handwriting. Dates, times, license plates, even sketches of who went where when. The woman had documented everything from mailman schedules to garbage collection patterns. And buried in those observations were months of evidence about Reed's visits. Eunice came to me yesterday. Said she always suspected something wasn't right about those afternoon visits when you were at work. She's willing to testify. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the leather chair. Fletcher, I want to destroy them both. Legally, completely, permanently. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Fletcher's smile could have curdled milk. Because with what we've got here, we're not just talking about divorce. We're talking about fraud, conspiracy, and emotional manipulation. Rochelle knew exactly what she was doing when she targeted your half-brother. What's the plan? First, we file for divorce citing adultery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Second, we freeze all joint assets pending investigation of financial fraud. Third, we serve Reed with a civil suit for alienation of affection. Missouri still recognizes that cause of action. Fletcher pulled out a thick legal document. And fourth, we make sure everyone in 3 counties knows exactly what kind of people they really are. 3 days later, I was splitting firewood behind the cabin when a silver Honda Civic pulled into my gravel driveway. A teenage girl got out, all confidence and designer jeans despite being barely old enough to drive. Scarla Holbrook, Reed's 17-year-old daughter, walked toward me like she owned the place. "Mr. Patterson, I'm Scarlett. I think we need to talk," she said, not asking permission. I set down the axe and wiped my hands on a rag. "Scarlett, what brings you all the way out here? My dad's an idiot, and your wife's a homewrecker. But I'm not here to apologize for either of them." She sat down on my porch steps without being invited. "I'm here to make a deal." This kid had more backbone than most grown men I knew. "I'm listening. I've been recording my dad's phone calls for 6 months. Not because I'm nosy, but because he's been promising to pay for my college, then spending money on hotels and jewelry for your wife instead." She pulled out her phone. "I've got everything. Hotel reservations, jewelry store receipts, even him talking to your wife about leaving their spouses." Smart girl. Smarter than her father, apparently. "What kind of deal are we talking about?" "I want my college fund back. Dad spent $18,000 of my education money on his midlife crisis. You help me get it back through the courts, and I'll testify about everything I've seen and heard." I studied her face. No tears, no drama, just cold calculation. She reminded me of myself at that age, practical, determined, unwilling to let other people's stupidity derail her future. "Scarlett, what you're describing is pretty serious. Your father could face criminal charges for misappropriating your college fund." "Good. Maybe you should have thought about that before he decided to throw away our family for a married woman." She stood up, straightening her jacket. "Mr. Patterson, my dad destroyed your marriage and mine. But I'm not going down with his ship." I respected that. Hell, I admired it. "What does your mother know about this?" "Mom knows Dad's been cheating, but she doesn't know about the money. Yet, I figured you and I could coordinate our timing. Maximum impact, you know." Fletcher had been right. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was about justice, accountability, and making sure the right people paid the price for their choices. "Scarlett, you've got yourself a deal. But I want your mother to know what's happening every step of the way. She deserves to make her own decisions about your father's behavior." Already planned on it. "Mr. Patterson, by the time we're done, everyone in town will know exactly who Reed Holbrook really is." As she drove away, I realized that sometimes the best allies come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, the children are wiser than their parents. I was cleaning my rifle on the cabin porch when Rochelle's white Mercedes came tearing up the gravel drive like she was being chased by demons. She barely put the car in park before jumping out, her designer heels completely wrong for the terrain. Behind her, Reed's BMW pulled in more cautiously. They'd come together, probably thinking there was safety in numbers. "Felix, we need to talk," Rochelle screamed, marching toward the porch in her business suit that cost more than some people's monthly salary. I continued working on the rifle, running the cleaning rod through the barrel with methodical precision. "Nothing's stopping you from talking, Rochelle. I'm right here. You can't just disappear and file these ridiculous lawsuits." She waved a manila envelope that looked suspiciously like court documents. "Fletcher Grimm is claiming I committed fraud. This is insane." Reed hung back by his car, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Smart man. You should be worried." "Fraud's a strong word," I said, finally looking up at her. "But when a woman finds out her husband and her lover are half-brothers, then uses that information to maximize the emotional damage of her affair, what would you call it?" The color drained from her face. "How did you know about the DNA test you ran without my permission?" "Fletcher's very thorough, also very good at tracing digital footprints." I set down the rifle and stood up. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Rochelle. This wasn't some accidental affair. This was calculated psychological warfare." Reed finally found his voice. "Felix, I swear I didn't know we were related." "I believe you, Reed. You're stupid, but you're not evil." "Her." I pointed at Rochelle. She knew exactly what button to push to hurt me the most. "That's not true." Rochelle's voice went up an octave. "I made a mistake. People have affairs all the time. People have affairs. They don't research their husband's DNA to find the one person who would cause maximum emotional damage." I walked down the porch steps, and both of them instinctively backed up. Dolores knows, by the way. Rochelle went white. My mother? You call my mother? Didn't have to. Eunice Kowalski called her. Seems your neighbor's been documenting Reed's visits for months. Old Eunice has been watching the neighborhood like a hawk for 40 years. She knows when a mailman's running late, let alone when married men are sneaking around with other men's wives. Reed looked sick. Felix, we can work this out. We're family, man. Family doesn't sleep with family's wives. And family doesn't steal from their own daughters to pay for hotel rooms. I smiled as Reed's face went pale. Yeah, Scarlett told me everything. How you been dipping into her college fund to wine and dine my wife. Real classy, Reed. You're going to destroy us both over one mistake. Rochelle asked, tears starting to form. One mistake. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Rochelle, you've been planning this for months. The DNA test, the affair, even the way you told me about it. You want to watch me break. Problem is, you underestimated what kind of man you married. I walked back toward the cabin. Fletcher will be in touch about the settlement conference. Bring your checkbooks. Both of you. As they drove away, I realized something important. They'd come here expecting the old Felix, the one who would negotiate and compromise and try to save everyone's feelings. They'd met someone entirely different. Someone who understood that respect isn't given, it's commanded. The call from Dolores Whitman came at 6 in the morning, 3 days later. Rochelle's mother had been calling every hour since Eunice's bombshell revelation, and I finally decided to answer. Felix Patterson, you explain to me right now why my daughter is crying hysterically in my guest bedroom, Dolores demanded without preamble. Good morning to you too, Dolores. How much did Eunice tell you? Everything. That my daughter has been carrying on with Reed Holbrook for over a year, and that you've known about it for months without saying a word. What kind of man handles marriage problems by hiring lawyers instead of talking to his wife? I pour myself coffee, taking my time. The kind of man whose wife deliberately chose his half-brother as her affair partner after researching his family history to maximize the emotional damage. Dead silence on the other end. Then, quietly, half-brother. DNA doesn't lie, Dolores. Rochelle submitted my DNA to one of those ancestry websites 3 months ago, discovered Reed and I share a father, then escalated her affair. This wasn't a mistake. This was psychological warfare. That can't be true. Rochelle wouldn't. Rochelle would, and did. Fletcher has all the documentation, including the congratulations email she sent to herself after discovering the family connection. More silence. Dolores Whitman was many things: manipulative, controlling, overly protective of her daughter, but she wasn't stupid. I could practically hear her connecting the dots. Felix, even if that's true, surely you can work through this. Marriage requires forgiveness. Marriage requires honesty, Dolores. It requires loyalty. It requires basic human decency. Your daughter demonstrated none of those qualities. She made a mistake. She made a choice. Multiple choices, over many months. And now she gets to live with the consequences. I set down my coffee cup. Dolores, I respected you for 18 years. I treated you like family, included you in holidays, listened to your advice about everything from business decisions to home repairs. But if you think I'm going to let your daughter destroy my life without consequences, you don't know me as well as you thought. What do you want, Felix? Money? Is this about the prenup? This is about justice. Your daughter needs to learn that actions have consequences. That you can't manipulate and betray people who love you without paying a price. She's my baby, Felix. She's all I have left. For a moment, my resolve softened. Dolores was 74 years old, a widow who'd poured all her hopes into her only child. But then I remembered Rochelle's shrug, her casual dismissal of 18 years of marriage, her calculated cruelty in choosing Reed. Dolores, I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. But your baby made adult choices. Now she gets to face adult consequences. What if she promises to stop seeing Reed? What if she goes to counseling? Too late for that. The papers are filed, the evidence is documented, and frankly, I don't want to be married to someone capable of that level of premeditated cruelty. I hung up before she could respond. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Dolores. I love my daughter, but what she did to you was unforgivable. I'm sorry, Felix. You deserve better. Sometimes, the truth has a way of revealing itself to everyone, even the people who don't want to see it. Fletcher's office felt like a war room. Documents covered every surface: bank statements, property deeds, business records, and a stack of legal motions thick enough to stop a bullet. Across the conference table sat Bernard Kowalski, Rochelle's high-priced attorney from Kansas City, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Gentlemen, let's cut through the theatrics," Kowalski began, adjusting his expensive suit. "My client is willing to accept a modest settlement to avoid lengthy litigation." Fletcher laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "Bernie, your client stole $18,000 from her husband's business account to fund her affair with his half-brother. Modest settlement isn't on the table. The money came from joint marital assets. The money came from Patterson Logistics operating accounts," I interrupted. "Accounts she had no legal access to, used for purposes that directly violated our prenuptial agreement." Kowalski shuffled his papers nervously. "Mr. Patterson, surely you can see that destroying your wife's financial future serves no constructive purpose." "Constructive purpose?" I leaned forward. "Bernie, your client researched my family history, discovered I had a half-brother, then deliberately targeted him for an affair to maximize emotional damage. That's not adultery. That's psychological warfare." Fletcher slid a thick folder across the table. DNA evidence, ancestry website records, email confirmations showing Mrs. Patterson's excitement about discovering the family connection. She knew exactly what she was doing. Kowalski opened the folder, and his face went pale. "This is extensive." "It gets better," Fletcher continued. "Reed Holbrook has been embezzling from his daughter's college fund to pay for hotels and jewelry. Scarlett Holbrook is prepared to testify about $18,000 stolen from her education account. My client isn't responsible for Mr. Holbrook's financial crimes. Your client helped him spend that money. Hotel receipts show joint occupancy. Credit card statements show shared expenses." I pulled out another document. "Plus, she encouraged him to take more. We have voice recordings of her telling Reed that Scarlett didn't need college anyway." Kowalski set down his pen. "What are you asking for?" "Complete forfeiture of spousal rights under the prenup," Fletcher said. "No alimony, no property division, no retirement benefits. Plus restitution for stolen funds and legal fees." "That's unreasonable." "What's unreasonable is a woman who systematically destroyed her marriage for sport," I said. "Rochelle gets to keep her personal belongings and her car. Everything else stays with me. She'll be financially ruined." She should have thought of that before she decided to wage psychological warfare against her husband. I stood up. "Bernie, your client chose this fight. Now she gets to lose it." Kowalski gathered his papers. "I'll need to discuss this with Mrs. Patterson." "You do that. But understand something. This offer expires in 48 hours. After that, we're adding criminal fraud charges to the civil suit." As they left, Fletcher poured 2 glasses of bourbon. "Think he'll convince her to take the deal?" "Doesn't matter. We've got enough evidence to bury her either way." I raised my glass. "To justice, Fletcher. Long overdue, but better late than never." The knock on my cabin door came at 7 in the morning. Reed stood on my porch looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and his hand shook as he held a manila envelope. "Felix, please. We need to talk," Reed said, his voice barely above a whisper. I let him in, pouring 2 cups of coffee out of habit more than hospitality. "What's in the envelope, Reed?" "Signed confession. Everything, the affair, the money I took from Scarlett's college fund, even the times I used your business contacts to get better deals for my own clients." He set the envelope on my kitchen table like it weighed 100 pounds. "I'm done fighting this." I opened the envelope and read through his handwritten statement. It was thorough, detailed, and completely damning. "Why now, Reed?" "Because Scarlett won't speak to me. Because Belinda filed for divorce yesterday. Because my boss found out about the embezzlement and fired me." He slumped in the chair across from me. "Because I finally realized what I've become." "And what's that?" "A pathetic middle-aged man who destroyed everything good in his life for a woman who never gave a damn about anyone but herself." Reed looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Felix, Rochelle doesn't love me. She never did. She used me to hurt you, and I was too stupid to see it." I studied my former best friend's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine remorse. "Reed, you stole from your own daughter." "I know. God help me, I know. Scarlett's college fund, money Belinda and I saved for 15 years. I spent it on hotel rooms and jewelry for a woman who was laughing at both of us behind our backs. What do you want from me? Nothing. I don't deserve anything from you. Reed stood up, leaving the confession on the table. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did. And I wanted to give you everything you need to make sure she pays for what she's done. He walked toward the door, then stopped. Felix, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just about the affair, but about being too blind to see what kind of person she really is. You deserve better friends than me. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table reading through his confession. 23 pages of detailed admissions that would guarantee Rochelle's complete financial destruction. Reed had documented everything, dates, amounts, even conversations where Rochelle had encouraged him to steal more from Scarlett's fund. My phone rang. Fletcher's number appeared on the display. Felix, you're not going to believe this. Rochelle just showed up at my office demanding to know why Reed won't return her calls. He just left here, brought me a full confession. A confession? Felix, this changes everything. With Reed's testimony, we can prove criminal conspiracy. She's not just losing the divorce. She's looking at potential jail time. I looked out my kitchen window at the peaceful Missouri countryside. Fletcher, sometimes justice takes its own sweet time. But when it finally arrives, it doesn't mess around. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people destroy themselves. The courthouse in Springfield buzzed with activity as our case reached its conclusion. Judge Margaret Harrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, had reviewed all evidence over 3 days of testimony. Rochelle sat beside Bernard Kowalski, looking pale and defeated. The confident woman who'd shrugged off her affair 6 months ago was gone. Mr. Patterson, Judge Harrison began, this court has reviewed extensive evidence of marital fraud, financial theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The defendant's actions constitute a deliberate pattern of psychological warfare against her spouse. Fletcher squeezed my shoulder. We'd presented everything. The DNA evidence, Rochelle's calculated targeting of Reed, the stolen money, even recordings where she'd encouraged Reed to take more from Scarlett's college fund. Furthermore, the judge continued, the defendant's use of ancestry research to identify and target the plaintiff's half-brother demonstrates premeditation that elevates this beyond simple adultery. Kowalski tried one last objection. Your Honor, my client's mental state. Your client's mental state was clear enough to research family genealogy, coordinate financial fraud, and systematically deceive multiple parties for over a year. Judge Harrison interrupted. This court finds the prenuptial agreement enforceable in its entirety. The gavel came down like thunder. Rochelle forfeited all spousal rights, owed restitution for stolen funds, and faced criminal charges for financial fraud. Reed's confession had sealed her fate completely. Outside the courthouse, Scarlett Holbrook waited by my truck. At 17, she'd shown more integrity than most adults I knew. Mr. Patterson, I wanted to thank you. The college fund money Dad stole. I'm getting every penny back, plus interest. You earned it, Scarlett. Standing up to your own father took real courage. He's not my father anymore. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. She handed me a graduation invitation. I'm getting a full scholarship to Missouri State. Business major. Maybe someday I'll run a company as honestly as you do. As she drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine pride. Not in destroying Rochelle and Reed, but in helping a good kid get justice. Fletcher joined me by the truck. So what's next, Felix? Back to running my business. Building things instead of tearing them down. I looked at the courthouse where my marriage had officially ended. Fletcher, I learned something important. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. And when they try to destroy you, make sure they learn the difference between a victim and an adversary. 1 year later, I stood on the porch of my cabin watching the sunrise paint the Missouri hills gold. The phone call from Fletcher had come the night before Rochelle's criminal trial had ended with a guilty verdict. 2 years in state prison for fraud, plus 5 years probation. Reed had testified against her to reduce his own sentence. My phone buzzed with a text from Dolores. Felix, justice was served. I'm sorry it took so long for me to see who my daughter really was. You deserve better. I'd forgiven Dolores months ago. Sometimes good people raise bad children despite their best efforts. She'd chosen truth over loyalty, which took more courage than most people possess. The sound of tires on gravel announced my morning visitor. Sarah Mitchell stepped out of her blue Honda, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the smile that had been brightening my days for the past 8 months. She was a librarian for Branson, 54 years old, divorced, with grown children and a laugh that could chase away any shadow. "Morning, handsome," Sarah said, settling beside me on the porch swing I'd built last month. "Morning, beautiful. How'd the book club meeting go last night?" Heated discussion about whether the heroine should have forgiven her cheating husband. Sarah handed me my coffee. "I may have mentioned that some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. Speaking from experience? Speaking from watching a good man rebuild his life after someone tried to destroy it." She leaned against my shoulder. "Felix, you never told me what finally convinced you to start dating again." I thought about it, watching a hawk circle overhead, realizing that Rochelle's betrayal said everything about her character and nothing about mine. When someone shows you who they are, you can either let it destroy your faith in people or use it to appreciate the ones worth trusting. And which camp do I fall into? "Sarah Mitchell, you're living proof that good people still exist." I kissed the top of her head. "Plus, you actually read the fine print before signing anything." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the day begin. My phone remained silent. No desperate calls, no manipulation, no drama. Just peace. Patterson Logistics was thriving. Scarlett Holbrook had started working part-time in my office, learning business management while finishing high school. Eunice Kowalski stopped by weekly with homemade cookies and neighborhood updates. Even Reed's wife Belinda had found happiness with a decent man who appreciated loyalty. As for me, I'd learned that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's living well. Building instead of tearing down. Choosing people who choose you back. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Somewhere in Jefferson City, Rochelle was learning that actions have consequences. But here on my porch, with Sarah beside me, and a future full of possibilities ahead, that felt like someone else's story entirely. Some endings are really beginnings in disguise.